So, starting from Joshua chapter 8 again, because I said that I wanted to talk about um, the people who were part of the army as they were about to take Ai in Joshua 8, who were tasked with fleeing. So, Joshua chapter 8, verse 5, Joshua is saying, "And I and all the people who are with me will approach the city, and when they come out against us, just as before, we shall flee before them," just as before, because in Joshua chapter 7, that's how Israel was defeated. They were fleeing from Ai. And verse 6, "And they will come out after us until we have drawn them away from the city, for they will say, they are fleeing from us just as before, so we will flee before them. Then you shall rise up from the ambush and seize the city." Verse 8, "And as soon as you have taken the city, you shall set the city on fire. You shall do so according to the word of the Lord." So I want to skip down to verse 13. "So they stationed the forces, the main encampment that was north of the city," that's the ambush, "and its rear guard west of the city." That was another ambush that was set up with 25,000 less men, 5,000 in total. And that's the rear guard west of the city. "But Joshua spent that night in the valley." And the valley is metaphorically like this low place. And like sometimes you say, like, we're in the valley of my life, like we are in a season of, like, we're in the low season where we're not so high up on the mountain. And I think that is important, because what's about to happen, what we spoke about last week in chapter 8, is Israel defeating Ai. But it starts out in the valley. So before we can walk into God's victory, it's pointing to the fact that we are in a valley, that God understands that we are in a low season of our life. But he's changing that. He's turning it around. "And as soon as verse 14, as soon as the king of Ai saw this, he and all his people, the men of the city, hurried and went out to the appointed place toward the Arabah to meet Israel in battle. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel pretended to be beaten before them and fled in the direction of the wilderness." Verse 16, "So all the people who were in the city were called together to pursue them. And as they pursued Joshua, they were drawn away from the city." Verse 17, "Not a man was left in Ai or Bethel who did not go out after Israel. They left the city open and pursued Israel." So the men of Ai left the city, like we talked about, and left the city open so the ambush could go in and take the city. And the point was, when they left the city, the ambush would take it and they would set the city on fire. But in the meantime, there were these people who were part of the army who were tasked to flee from Ai, to draw them away from the sea. So their whole time, they're fleeing the same way that they fled before in Joshua chapter 7, but they fled in chapter 7 because they were fleeing for their lives. They were fleeing in fear, but now they're fleeing in obedience. And it's like ironic that this is the way that the Lord uses this strategy, the same way that they were defeated, to use the same strategy to give them victory. Fleeing once before in fear, but now fleeing now in obedience. But from my perspective, as I'm reading this, I could kind of, if I want to put myself in the position of those men who were fleeing, my thought would be, because the men that were fleeing, they're not Joshua. They're not hearing directly from the Lord. They're hearing only from Joshua. So this man of God has given me the command to flee from this army, not to go up and fight them straight on, but to run away from them. The last time that we ran away from them, they captured some of us and killed us. So I'm supposed to do this same thing, trusting that the outcome might be different this time. And the sign for them who were fleeing to stop fleeing was for the ambush to take the city. And the sign that the ambush took the city was the smoke from the city being burned, that was going to be the sign. So if you think about it, right, how long does it take realistically for smoke to be seen from a distance away, for smoke to be seen in the sky from a distance away? Because you burn something, it's not like immediately when you burn something the smoke goes up. And the Bible doesn't say that immediately as they took the city and they burned it, the smoke went up. Like it actually says in verse 20, verse 19, and the men of the ambush rose quickly out of their place, and as soon as he had stretched out his hand, Joshua, they ran and entered the city and captured it, and they hurried to set the city on fire. They hurried to set the city on fire because of the fact that they have their other team is running away for their lives, not knowing, and then they're waiting for this sign. So they have to hurry to set it on fire because it's going to take a long time for that smoke to come in the air. No matter like if you're burning a lot of stuff at the same time, it's still going to take some time for that to happen. So the point of me saying this is because these men who are fleeing have to wait for this sign, and they're fleeing this entire time, right? They had to start fleeing from the moment that the people saw them and left the city, and they have to flee until the city is completely empty and for the ambush to go in there, and then they have to set the city on fire. And this whole time they're fleeing. So like their faith must be tested in this moment as they're running away. Like, man, I hope that this is working. I hope that they're taking the city. I hope that they're setting on fire, because we're going to keep running in, and the doubt must be settling in. And how we can relate this to our lives is because if God is telling us to do something that he has told us to do before, and it's like seeming like it's the same and we have to continue, and we're not seeing any sign yet, we're not seeing the smoke of the city go up yet, because it's taken a while for the city to be set on fire, then it's taken a while for the smoke to be visible enough for us to know that we have the victory. And this whole time we're running, and we're waiting, and it's like it's not happening, we don't see it, and we're doubting, and we're having this fear. But the Lord gave us the command already that you have to flee in obedience, and you're not fleeing because you are incapable of defeating them, but you are doing that because I've commanded you to do it. This is how I'm going to give you the victory. But you know, we have the doubt and we have the fear, and I think it's understandable, but the smoke is coming. Like, we're gonna see that sign eventually. And verse 20, so when the men of Ai looked back, behold, the smoke of the city went up to heaven, and they had no power to flee this way or that. So when the smoke finally comes up, we get to turn around. We get the command from the Lord to turn around and then attack our enemy and then claim our victory. But just hold on like these men are doing, fleeing in obedience with the doubt that they had in their mind, though the Bible doesn't speak specifically on it. If we can put ourselves in their positions, or look at the position in life that we are in right now, what the Lord has commanded us to do, you may not see wind, you may not see rain, but you know that this is what the Lord told me to do. And though it looks like I'm running from my enemy, though it looks like I'm not winning this battle, though it looks like this is exactly how I lost last time, it's not going to end up, the story's not going to end the way it did last time, because now the Lord has given me the command. This is what he has told me to do. So let me just continue to run, though I'm scared. Let me continue to run, though I'm not sure. Let me continue to run, even though I'm not seeing the smoke. But when you do see the smoke, then you know you have the victory. And then we could kind of use what we learned from Joshua chapter 8 as well, where we're holding out the javelin until we've seen the fullness and the complete fulfillment of the Lord's promise that he gave us as we're capturing this victory. So that's what I wanted to kind of talk about, just the endurance that we need while we are doing the thing that God has called us. The instruction that may seem ironic, the instruction that God gives us to do that may seem like it doesn't make sense. Why are you telling me to do the same thing again? Why are you telling me to run away from the enemy when we could just attack them head on? It's because the Lord has a plan, and he knows exactly how to execute it perfectly so that we have complete victory. And so the prayer that you should be praying, the prayer that the strength that you should receive from the Lord is to just the endurance that it takes to do the thing that God has commanded us to do, even though it seems ironic. So yeah, that was a little bit more of Joshua chapter 8. And yeah, we'll see what the Lord has for us next time.